Hello everyone, this is Revati for Kat Scrappiness. Today I have a very fun, simple, and adorable card perfect for your Valentine's Day projects. Before we take a look at the project and the products that I used to create this card, I would really appreciate if you could take a minute to subscribe to the Kat Scrappiness channel and hit the bell icon so that you get notified each time we post a new video. Let's take a look at the die set that I'll be using to create our card today. This is the Happily Avo-After die, which was part of the latest Be My Valentine release by Kat Scrappiness. Isn't this die really adorable? Well, we have 5 dies here, 2 little avocados with different faces, and a border die which would be perfect to align our little avocados. Both of these avocados come with an embossed heart shape on the center of each of them, and we also have a heart die which would fit perfectly in that embossed shape. Also, I have a trail of tiny little hearts which we could use to embellish our card front. Now, using two different colors of green cardstock, I cut out both of the center pieces of the avocado with the embossed heart and the outline image of our avocado. You will notice how the faces of both my avocados have been cut out really well and that detailed embossed heart image in the center of them. I also cut out the hearts and the tiny trail of hearts using some red cardstock, and here you'll see I'm storing it in this triangle tray again by Kat Scrappiness. Now, to create the face of our little avocados, you could cut out the same avocado piece using some black cardstock and inlay those tiny little pieces into the main frame. But another very easy technique is to just cut a little strip of black cardstock and mount it behind the openings. Now to stick these tiny strips of black cardstock, I'm using my fine tip barely art glue and going all around the facial opening of the avocado. I can now stick the tiny little piece and cover the eyes and the mouth, and we have our face of the avocado ready to go. You will notice that I did wiggle the tiny little strip a little bit so that the glue is evenly spread onto the strip and it does not ooze out of the edges. Now, using the same barely art glue, I glued up the entire back of this avocado and we can stick it onto the base layer. Well, here I'll be showing you two ways of sticking these two layers. For the first one, I directly lay flat onto the base layer. For the second one, we will create some dimension between both the layers. Now, just like we did for the first one, in this one too, I am using a tiny black strip of cardstock to add to my face. Now, instead of gluing it directly onto the base layer, I am using some foam tape all across this layer to add some dimension for our avocados. I very carefully aligned both of these pieces together. The foam tape that I used here is not very thick, so I got a very enough subtle dimension that is exactly what I needed for my card. Now, adding dimension to your card is definitely a personal preference. I love adding dimension to my cards. But when it comes to mailing out these cards, some of these cards do need some extra postage, but others can easily be mailed without any extra postage. Now, for the first avocado, where I lay it flat onto the base layer, I thought, well, why not add some dimensions? So instead of popping up the avocados, I popped up the tiny little heart in the center of the avocado. While on the second one, where I popped up the base layer, I decided to go flat with my heart. Now you will notice I am using some liquid glue on my foam tape, and even when I'm laying the heart flat on the avocado, the liquid glue will give me some wiggle room for me to adjust my heart directly in the center of those two avocados. Now that the main focal points of our project is ready, let us work on the card itself. For the card base, I'm using a green shade which is very similar to my avocados, and for my card front, which I will be decorating a little bit, I'm using a plain white cardstock. Now, there are many ways you could create a beautiful card front. For me, this technique that I'm going to do is one of the most best An elegant looking technique. Here I'm using the diamond wire wood grain frame die set from Kat Scrappiness, and instead of cutting out the frame, I will be embossing the frame. So, well, you see, you don't need to have embossing folders to get an embossed look. Here I'm using my Cricut Cuttlebug die cutting machine. So instead of placing it on plate B, I will place it on the rubber sheet to get an embossed look. For the base of my card, I cut the green cardstock to 5.5 by 8.5 and scored it at 4.25. Now this will be a side folding card. Now my card front perfectly fits onto this card. All we need to do is adhere both of these focal points onto our card front and add a sentiment or a sentiment strip, a label, or even a die cut sentiment to finish our card. Now, before I add all of those focal points and sentiment strips and my embellishments, I decided to adhere this card front onto the note card. For that, you will see I'm using some strong double-sided tape and covering the entire card front. Well, since this has a lot of texture, I will make sure that my entire card front is covered with glue and does not peel out easily. I also went ahead and ran my note card with some glue stick to add some extra adhesion onto my card. I firmly press down and rub my fingers all across the card front to make sure it's tightly adhered onto my note card. Now it's time to adhere our focal points on our card. Well, at this point, you could either make it a side folding or a top folding card. I decided to go with a side folding card. I'm using some liquid glue to adhere both of these images. Since we already have some dimension on these die cut images, I decided to lay them flat onto our card front. You could also use a tape runner, but I feel liquid glue does give us some wiggle room just in case we are not happy with the positioning of the focal point. Now, while we work on our sentiment, I decided to put something heavy onto these focal points for them to dry completely. For my sentiment, I have this Love You word die along with the shadow die, again by Kat Scrappiness. I cut out a couple of these Love You sentiments using white cardstock and one using rose gold cardstock. I love how delicately these die cut sentiments have been cut out, and I love the font on them. For our card today, I will be using only the word die and skip the shadow die. Well, the Happily Avo-After Die set goes perfectly with You Cock My World stamp set, which is also available on the Kat Scrappiness website. Well, here's a closer look at the Love You sentiment that I cut out using some rose gold cardstock. Isn't it really shiny and sparkly? Now, whenever I'm using word dies to make my sentiments, I like to stack them up for some extra dimension. For that, I like to stack up these sentiments using some barely art glue, and I hold them using my reverse tweezers from Kat Scrappiness. The last layer, which is the rose gold layer, is all stuck onto these white layers of cardstock. Now you could also use some spray adhesive for this, but I feel this fine tip barely art glue gives me the best result. I love my reverse tweezers when it comes to holding such delicate die cut pieces. Now to finish off our cards, I did embellish it using those tiny trails of heart, which was again part of the kit, and added some shine to the hearts using my Spectrum Noir glitter brush pens. I added glitter on both of those big hearts in the center of the avocados and also on the tiny little hearts. Now, well, what's a Valentine cards with a lots more shine and sparkle? So on top of those sparkly hearts, I added some glossy accents. This glossy accents now looks a lot milky, but when it dries up, it does dry up clear. I added them on both of the huge hearts on the center of our avocado and also the tiny trails of heart. The glossy accent should take around 15 to 20 minutes to completely dry, but I give it a lot more time just to make sure it is not damaged when I try to mail the card or when it's kept in an envelope. Well, here's the look at the finished card. I had so much fun creating this card, and I hope you had fun watching the video too and got inspired. All the supplies that I used in this video will be linked in the description box below. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe.